Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A look at MLG&W's past, present, and future tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We're joined tonight by Jerry Collins, President and CEO of MLG&W. Thanks for being here again.
Glad to be here.
Along with Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. You are retiring at the end of this year, give or take. Is that right? And
that's what I hear.
That's what you hear after 10 years at MLG&W. We'll talk about some things going on right now, but just one, after 10 years there, the biggest challenge that you've faced and the biggest challenge you think MLG&W faces as it goes into its next 10, 20, and 100 years.
Sure. So things that are going on currently, we are about 65% deployed with the smart meters, which has been the biggest project in the history of Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. And we're ahead of schedule and under budget, both of which are good things. And about the end of next month, October, we will be fully deployed with electric residential meters. So that's a big step in the right direction, and it takes a little bit longer to put in the gas meters and the water meters. So we'll be putting those in next year.
The scope of that project in terms of dollars is what?
$240 million.
And how is that? Some of that came from the federal government, is that correct?
No,
it was all MLG&W.
That's correct.
How is that paid for?
Okay, so.
No, I mean, that's a huge number, so it's an interesting thing that people probably go, whoa, wait, $245 million.
So this is a capital expenditure, and we sell bonds when we have a project that's this large, so we can pay for it over a 20-year period. And this is a unique project in terms of capital infrastructure because it not only significantly improves the level of service, but it also saves money. And you don't have that combination all the time.
A smart meter at some, and we're way into this, but I'm fascinated by this, in part because it was a little bit politically, there was some real resistance, there's still some resistance to smart meters nationally and locally.
Sure.
The benefits of a smart meter, and what is a smart meter for those who haven't gotten one yet?
So a smart meter is a meter that sends us the information on how much energy or water that you've used rather than having to send a meter reader by your house. It also lets us put all of your energy usage on a password-protected website that you can use to observe your energy usage. And with electrical energy, you can look and see how you use energy in 15-minute increments, whereas previously all you saw was once a month. Now you can see what happens when you turn on the dryer, what happens when you turn on the air conditioner, and it gives you a much better sense of how you use energy and what possibilities there are for saving energy.
And that's on the consumer, on the end user. That I could ostensibly modify my habits and spend less money on electricity and gas and so on, in that sense. I guess part of the resistance was, no one likes to see somebody lose a job, meter readers losing a job. There was pushback on that. What was that like, and what was your response to that?
Well, no one is being laid off. But as positions become vacant that we no longer need, we just won't fill them.
Yeah.
And we're doing that at a very rapid rate. This year's budget, which will take to City Council in a few weeks, will show a decrease in the total personnel complement. And this is something which will continue for years going forward. Like when we have all the residential electric meters as smart meters, that's 200,000 fewer truck trips a year.
Wow. So
it has an incredible impact on our ability to operate more cheaply, which then saves the customer money.
Yeah. Bill Dries.
So Jerry, tell me where smart meters get you in terms of the larger transformation to a smart grid.
Smart grid is the ultimate concept. Smart meters is a piece of that. Smart grid lets us do things like handle outage restoration more efficiently and more quickly. It will tell us when we have full implementation of all the smart meters which homes don't have power or which businesses don't have power. It will let us know if we have outages within outages, which is always a problem. Like if you have a 5,000 customer outage and you fix it, well, are there smaller outages within that? Currently, we don't know that unless those people call us back and tell us.
Which I think a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah,
they assume you know
that's
that
correct.
so they're just kind of waiting for you guys to come. You know, in a storm. Well, of course they know. They have some way of knowing that my power is out, but that isn't necessarily the case.
Currently, you have to call, but with smart meters being fully deployed with all the bells and whistles, we will know that you don't have power.
Yeah. Back to Bill. Sorry.
Yeah. So with the smart grid, there are also other advantages to this. There are also, I mean, it's a tremendous thing to tout to a business that's looking to relocate.
Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely. And so, for instance, when we have fully deployed smart grid, which is smart meters is a piece of, a outage that currently might knock out power to 1,500 customers, with smart grid might only knock out power to 300 customers, because we'll have switches that are automated and smart that can isolate that outage to a smaller area.
Right. So since you brought up outages, there's been a lot of discussion, some of it on the city council, about whether we're having more of these, in part because we just got through with the third largest incident that we've had, the Tom Lee storm that came up on the Memorial Day weekend. Are we having more of these, not on that kind of basis, but on a smaller basis? Are we having more disruptions, or is it just that storm has kind of magnified the problem?
Well, of course, Memphis is a city of trees, and the vast majority of the power outages when you have a storm is caused by trees. When you have a 80-foot tall oak tree falling on a 40-foot tall power line or pole, that's not an infrastructure problem, that's a tree problem. And our trees are getting bigger, and when you have some of these hot, dry summers, sometimes they're not as healthy as they might be going forward. So trees can be a problem, but the trees are beautiful. Memphis is a city of trees, and so that's what we have. The all-time record for what I would call major storms was 2011, and I define a major storm as a storm that knocks out more than 30,000 customers. In 2011, there were 5 such storms. This year, we've had 4. And I hope we can get till the end of the year without having a 5th. So when you have more frequent storms, you know, there's occasionally a year when we don't have any major storms. But this year has been one where there's been 4.
Right. And you've been pleased with the utilities response?
Our philosophy on outage restoration is spare no expense. Get the power restored as quickly as possible.
When those outages happen, we were joking as we were coming in the studio. I mean, one thing you said you'd look forward to when you retire is not worrying about radar, not worrying about the possible weather system coming through, not being called in the middle of the night. I mean, when you look at the response the teams have now, the people who go out and respond in these major storms, how has it changed over the last 10 years? The smart meters are one thing you just talked about, but in other ways, have you changed your strategies in terms of, I mean, going back to Hurricane Elvis before that, and I don't think you were there when the big ice storm happened, but how has MLGW adapted over time to these events?
So for instance, now we have an outage map. Now we have an app that we initiated back in the spring of 2011 when we were having all those storms in 2011. So you can actually go to your app on your phone and you can look at the outage map on your phone, which is something that we didn't used to have. And we have a really smart system in terms of when you call us, how it classifies your outage as a fuse outage or a circuit outage, et cetera, et cetera. It does a marvelous job of doing that very quickly so we can prioritize our restoration efforts.
Well, switch gears a little bit. Last time you were on the show in the spring, it was about the aquifer. So the aquifer that supplies water to Memphis, massive and very clean, very high quality drinking water that's also very cheap. And some controversy around TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, drilling holes directly into the aquifer to put water into the new gas plant that they're building. What's the status on that?
So the status is that the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, in concert with the local Shelby County Health Department, is doing a study of the wells around the ash pond and on the edge of McKellar Lake where these high levels of arsenic have been found. And they're also going to be working with TVA to see if when TVA turns on their new wells, if that has any impact in drawing that arsenic towards the aquifer. So we're waiting for that study to be done so we can then figure out what's the best course of action going forward.
And as you know, it's a strange situation in some ways. I think we talked about maybe when you were on, but people have written about it and talked about it. MLGW is a customer of TVA, right? I mean, MLGW buys power and so on from them.
That's correct.
And yet you've got this relationship where I think you had said, I know a lot of people had said they would prefer that TVA, in terms of taking the water it needs for this new plant, this new natural gas-fired plant to replace the old coal plant, that they do either that they get the water through MLGW, or they talked at one point about either river water or what do they call it, dirty water, which is like partially treated, but not use the aquifer. They went ahead and they drilled in the aquifer. Does that make for a difficult relationship between MLGW and TVA?
It's, I wouldn't call it a difficult relationship. Memphis is TVA's largest customer, and we've always had a good relationship. We think their best course of action in this case is to buy the water directly from MLGW rather than to pump directly out of the aquifer. But I think TVA wants to do the right thing and will make the right decision ultimately.
Are they still open to doing that, even though they've drilled their wells? Do you think there's some possibility they turn around and say, well, actually, we're going to go ahead and buy the water from MLGW?
I think there is a possibility that they would ultimately buy the water from MLGW.
One more question on all that. Back to the quality of water. I mean, that it is, and Bill talks about economic development and businesses and so on. The water is an economic development amenity, right? I mean, if you're trying to get a company to relocate, we've had, for instance, the local brewers on about the rise of the craft brewers, and they make the point that we can brew really great beer here, which sounds like a silly thing, but at a lower cost than you can in other places because you have to treat the water so heavily. That's true of beer, but it's also true of all kinds of manufacturing processes that aren't food related or drink related, require a tremendous amount of water. What is the balancing act there of encouraging companies to come or to expand and then use more water because it is this low cost amenity, high quality amenity, but how do you monitor that too much water doesn't get used? And I'm not focused on TVA right now, that too much water doesn't get used, that they're using it appropriately and so on.
So first of all, we confidently state that we have the best quality drinking water in the country. And don't let any of this arsenic stuff scare you. It's not getting in the drinking water. Our drinking water is just as good as it has always been. We have great water. As you know, this water comes from an aquifer, which is 500 to 1,000 feet below the surface. It has been filtered for 2,000 years. It is very soft water. Industries love our water. At the same time, over the last 17 years, our citizens and our businesses have gradually been using less and less water. So we're pumping less and less. And as a result of that, the hydrostatic pressure of that aquifer is actually rising, which means our aquifer is becoming more healthy. And that's a really unique position for us to be in, to have the best water in the country with an aquifer that is becoming more healthy.
And why are they using less? Just efficiencies?
Yes.
More efficient washing machines, more efficient dishwasher, or whatever it is?
All kinds of government regulations which have regulated how much water dishwashers use, washing machines use, shower nozzles, toilets, et cetera, all that's coming to bear, and we're using less water on a daily basis.
All right, let's back to Bill.
So, Jerry, as you head for retirement from this, what would be your advice for whoever comes next in this job? Where do you think this job is at in terms of its responsibilities and where the utility is heading?
So my governing principle at MLGW from day one has been always do that which is in the best interest of the customers as a whole. I think that's a good governing principle. I would encourage the people that follow me to use that same principle. And whenever there's a choice or a question, ask themselves what is in the best interest of the customers as a whole. And that usually answers the question quickly and easily.
Mm-hmm. To be sure, that sounds easier than it winds up being, because being the president of Memphis Light, Gas, and Water Division is something of a lightning rod. It's a different kind of lightning rod probably than the traditional political lightning rod that people think about. But this is something that affects citizens on a daily basis, and so they have a lot of questions. They have a lot of concerns.
And we're in a position where we've been the utility with the lowest utility rates of any major city in the country for 5 years in a row. And I think that's a very important position that we should try to maintain, because we have very many customers in the city that are poor, that do not make a lot of money, and the utility bill that comes each month is a big deal. And many people struggle to make ends meet when that utility bill comes. Also, the fact that we have the lowest rates in the country helps attract industry. So it helps the low income and it helps attract industry. And so keeping the rates low is a really important thing in my mind going forward.
You also have a considerable, I'll call it a retinue of regulations. Is as a public utility, as one of the few that has light, gas, and water in it, what do you think about the level of federal regulation?
The biggest cause of increased cost is regulations. We've seen that especially over the last 5 or 6 years. The regulations just keep on coming. Like, as I put together this year's budget, a new state regulation now requires that I have metal detectors at our facilities where the public comes in and out. Otherwise, they can bring guns into the building. And I cannot keep them from bringing guns in the building unless I have a metal detector with a security guard standing there. So now I've got to hire more security guards, buy these metal detectors. That's an expense which is going to be ongoing for years and years to come.
In a state that has gun laws that in some ways are very different from that federal regulation.
Yes.
As well.
Mm-hmm. You talked a little bit before about poor customers, and I've got to imagine, I don't know, but I mean, I've got to imagine that's one of the most difficult things that I can't imagine anyone takes lightly the idea of shutting off someone's utilities.
Absolutely.
You need to make money, and people have to pay their bills, and there's consequences and so on. But at the end of the day, if you're thinking about an elderly person who, for whatever reason, is not in a position to pay their heat or their water or their air conditioning, at some point, MLGW has to make a choice to say, look, this has gone on too long and we have to cut that off. That can't, how does that decision get made? And how do you feel about that when you know that, I don't know that you know each one that happens, but you certainly probably see numbers that X number of people were cut off this month for overpayment or underpayment. How does MLGW handle that? How do you handle that?
So it's against the law to give anybody free utilities. So that's not an option. Nevertheless, MLGW has possibly the most liberal payment and credit policy in the country. And we try every way possible to help a customer meet their obligation without cutting them off. But that said, we also find ourselves cutting off thousands of people for non-payment each year. And basically 90% of them pay those amounts and are reconnected within 24 hours.
Yeah. So it's just that stick is what's necessary at some point to get them to pay.
That's correct.
But you have all kinds of programs. I was writing them down. Plus One, you work with MIFA, the Share the Pennies. There are different programs. Talk about some of those and how those work to try to mitigate the number of people whose utilities are shut off.
So for instance, with Plus One, that helps a person with their utility bill if they have some kind of a medical emergency, if they've recently lost their job or something. That's for helping a person on a one-time crisis event. Share the pennies, on the other hand, is more like teaching someone how to fish, because we are making improvements using the Share the Pennies funds to people's homes so that they use less energy on an ongoing basis, and hopefully their utility bills will then also be less, and that will improve their quality of life.
Switch a little bit for people who don't know, and I get murky on this, so I imagine other people do too. MLGW is owned by the city of Memphis.
That's correct.
Just walk through its structure and why it is structured the way it is. And as we were talking before about how your replacement will not be hired by the board of MLGW, which I should have known but didn't. It'll be the mayor bringing a recommendation to the city council. So talk about that relationship and how it's set up.
So dating back to 1939, MLGW was established as an entity which is owned by the city of Memphis. MLGW employees are not city employees. The pension system is separate from the city pension system. The health care is separate from the city. It's actually against the law for the city to subsidize MLGW's operations, and it's against the law for MLGW to subsidize the city's operations, except to the extent which is stated by state law, which is in the form of an annual payment in lieu of taxes from MLGW to the city. Otherwise, our finances are totally separate and must be kept separate.
Does MLGW make money every year, or do you run a surplus every year?
We are a nonprofit company. We have to make sure that we have positive net income so that we don't lose money over a long period of time. But we are not a profit-making company, and we have no shareholders.
And no shareholders. How many, I mean, how common is this? There was a wave, for instance, of public utilities that were sold. Enron famously was, had gathered a bunch of public utilities. I think Mayor Harrington back in the day talked about wanting to consider, maybe some city council people, Bill, and you would remember better than me, about wanting to sell MLGW. That talk seems to not come up anymore. But what is the state nationally of how many city-owned, public utilities are there?
There's thousands,
okay.
And in the TVA system, there's 155 publicly owned systems that TVA serves. The city of Memphis and its citizens already own MLGW. If MLGW was ever sold, well, whoever bought it has to figure out some way to recapture that expense. So essentially, our citizens would be buying it back a second time, which doesn't make any sense. And the only way to do that is to raise rates.
Okay. Bill, just a couple minutes left.
Jerry, let's talk about some of the alternatives that are out there. Solar power, wind power. TVA did some buyback programs that involved some residential rooftops. More prominently, I think they did commercial real estate rooftops as well. Are we going to see more of that?
We will see more, yes, because the price of solar power is becoming cheaper. We have a requirement that we must buy all of the power that we sell from TVA. TVA has a very diverse portfolio of power generation facilities, which includes solar, it includes wind, as well as coal, natural gas, hydro, and nuclear. Citizens can put solar panels on their homes, but they would not be, that would not get them out of the point of being dependent on Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. They would still be dependent on the grid. They would still need to buy electricity from MLGW or natural gas.
Right, and the clean line that's been talked about in terms of wind power, that does not actually involve the big windmills that we've seen in other places. Here, it would be that power generated elsewhere coming through here?
It would actually be generated in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And then there would be power lines built to bring it to Tennessee. And if they were to sell that, they would sell it to TVA, and TVA would in turn sell it to us or other utilities.
A couple of questions along that, just a couple minutes left. In this, we've just had a whole bunch of hurricanes, really destructive, sad, terrible hurricanes. And people talk about, and when we talk about solar, we talked about the power plant going from a coal-fired plant to a gas-fired plant. In part, gas is cheaper, more available in the United States, also less emissions, and the environmental groups were very happy about that. as MLG&W, I mean, you all have to plan over long periods of time. What do you guys look at in terms of climate change? And do you all believe in climate change? Is that a part of your strategic plan and your long-term outlook?
So the effects of climate change, if the climate becomes warmer, means obviously that we'll have warmer summers and we'll have winters that are not as cold. That will potentially increase the use of electricity in the summer, and we've always been a summer peaking electrical load anyway, and probably less use of natural gas in the winter months. So this will put some added pressure on TVA to be able to give us the electricity that we need when we need it during the summer months as the load picks up due to air conditioning.
Yeah, okay. We leave it there. Sorry, I ran out of time, but thank you for being here. Good luck in your future work. Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you, Bill. And thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.